Hello and welcome to the state of Kentucky. I'm Bruce Maples, publisher of Forward Kentucky, and we're really glad to have you with us this Friday. We have some very special guests with us today. I want to welcome them into the stream in just a minute. Before I do, I want to share a couple of things with you. If you have ideas or suggestions of people you would like to see on the show, you can send them to tips@forwardky.com. And we're always looking for ideas for guests and for show topics, so feel free to send them on. And remember that if you comment on YouTube or Facebook, we can see your comments, and we might share them in the broadcast. And if they're questions, we might ask them of our guests. So we got out of the primary in the middle of the pandemic, and we had the election, and we all know that Amy McGrath won the primary. One of the interesting things, though, was the variety of candidates that we had. And I thought one of the most interesting candidates, frankly, in the primary was a gentleman from somewhat rural Kentucky who had a very interesting background, a military background, a newspaper background, an education background, and a farming background. And I just thought that really made him an interesting person, and I wanted to have him back on the show. So we're going to welcome Mike Broihier back to the state of Kentucky. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to see your face again, Bruce.
It's good to see yours. I have to say, though, your face looks a little more tanned and bronzed than the last time I saw it.
Well, it only goes down to here. I have been trying to catch up on a year's worth of neglected farming. You said somewhat rural. This is about as rural as it gets here in Lincoln County, but I have been, farms do not stop growing and falling down while you're on the campaign trail. They do not respect, the electoral calendar. And so I have been working real hard to catch up. And so, yep, my bronze starts about halfway down my arms and only continues on to here on my neck. So
I love it. I love it. So for those who don't know or don't remember, the name of your farm, if I remember correctly, is Chicken Bristle Farm.
It is indeed. Yeah, we are in an old unincorporated part of Lincoln County, historically black part of Lincoln County. Called Chicken Bristle, and has got quite a very, very colorful past. And when we moved here, no one had claimed the farm name, so we did.
That's interesting. I figured it had something to do with chickens, but I didn't know it was about the area. So you've gotten rested up, I hope, a little bit from the campaign.
Indeed, yeah. It's interesting to have a regular schedule again. To have that is the thing that you don't have during campaign. And when someone says, "Will you come talk to us?" you just get in the car and start driving, or at least we did. Yeah. And my wife Lynn and I did. And so having not embarrassed to say, a little bit of time to sit on the couch has been quite welcomed.
Absolutely. When I ran for office, and it wasn't anything like what you did, but when I ran for office, I remember the night of the election, or the night of the election count, I was asked multiple times, "Well, how do you feel?" And I think people were a little surprised when I said relieved, and they said, "Well, what does that mean?" I said, "Look, whether I win or whether I lose, I'm done walking and knocking on doors and doing all this work. So it's going to be nice to just have some rest time." So what have you've had some time to reflect, obviously, on the campaign. Any thoughts you want to share about the campaign itself, how it went, your experiences, anything like that?
Well, it was an incredible experience. It was something that had never been on the horizon for my wife or I. It was a huge decision, but you and I had spoken early on, and once we decided that this is what we were going to do as a team, we just threw ourselves into it. And so It was like, okay, here's what we're going to do now. It's like when we bought a farm, neither of us had ever farmed a day in our lives. And we went from being active duty Marines to buying a 75-acre farm in Kentucky and saying, okay, we're farmers now. And so we tend to throw ourselves into things. And but what I didn't anticipate, Bruce, on this voyage was the incredible people that I would meet way, and the diverse, and this isn't, I'm not trying to tick any boxes here, but just people all over Kentucky that you never would have had the opportunity to meet these folks, because as a farmer, this is what you do. It's a 7-day-a-week occupation. You're tired at the end of the day. You're not going to drive to Louisville or Bowling Green or out to the Purchase to, talk to a bunch of folks. It's just not something you do. And so from the campaign staff, we ultimately built, and I know we're going to bring Liam in here in a few minutes, but from the campaign staff that Liam specifically built, who are professional and knowledgeable and just knew things that Lynn and I never would have known. To the tireless volunteers that they recruited, and particularly the young folks, and then the supporters, who I have to say, frankly, many of them showed a great deal of courage supporting my campaign, particularly later on, and they stuck with me. And so that was perhaps the best part and the most edifying part of the whole process.
Good. We've got some comments that I want to share. So I'm just going to put them up and you can see them as I do. Here's one from Brenda Erickson. Thanks for having my candidate back on.
I'm sure you know the Ericksons. They are the most loyal Democrats in Kentucky. I miss them. I miss Tabitha. I miss their little granddaughter, Charlie Ray. So hi to everybody.
And yes, I know the Ericksons quite well. And you're right. They are amazing people and wonderful workers. Here's one from Mr. Yang saying, "Go Mike." And
2020.
And here's one from Joni Prentice, who's one of our members on Forward Kentucky. One from Betsy Foster. Dmitry Strakovsky. That's a name I don't know, but it sounds like you do.
Professor Strakovsky.
Okay. All right. And let's see. Oh, Betsy Foster wants to add, I hope you will run again. So
well, I'm sure we'll talk about that later in the program, Bruce.
Yes, we will. So one of the things that was fascinating to me about your campaign, there were a lot of things that were fascinating to me about your campaign, but one of them was your staff. I remember when I got, I guess it was an email from you saying that the Yang presidential staff, once he suspended his campaign, that some of them came to Kentucky and decided to jump into your race. And I was just like, what? Really? And you know, and for a while you put them up there at the farm, which the whole thing just was like, I don't know, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington sort of thing.
It became one of those, you know, every organization develops its legends and myths and ethos. And one of them, you know, in the Marine Corps, we say, well, back in the day or back in the old Corps, but the original staff, they would say, well, we were living on the farm. And you mentioned Pang Yang, who's there. Well, Pang was exiled to a leaky old mobile home in February that a neighbor pulled onto the farm because we ran out of bed space. So poor Pang, last man, had to live out in this leaky old mobile home. But
he drew the short straw, as it were.
Folks that didn't know me, they didn't know Lynn, they all knew each other. But you know, you said the Yang Gang, but by the time the campaign had ended, many of the folks who joined weren't Yang Gangers, but the original folks who came in, literally, some folks were driving to another state. And and they turned around and started driving to Kentucky and said, okay, this is the next most important race. This dude reflects our values and we need to win this one.
Well, let's hear from somebody who actually did that. Liam deClive-Lowe, and welcome to the state of Kentucky.
Thank you so much for having me, Bruce. It's good to see you again.
And that has a twofold meaning. Welcome to the state of Kentucky. That's what somebody said to you when you decided to just get in the car and drive to Chicken Bristle. Right.
Well, you know, every county in Kentucky is almost like a state unto itself, each with their own culture. But I'm from Louisville, so I was someone who at least had roots here in Kentucky and had been thinking about this race for a really long time. And then when we brought everyone else in, I think it was a real great introduction to the state for them to go right to the farm. It was like they got to kind of learn the ropes very quickly.
Yes. Now you had been working on the Yang campaign, right?
Yeah.
And if I remember the story, well, why don't you tell the story about, leaving the Yang campaign and winding up in Kentucky?
Well, it had started actually that I was one of a large number of people stretching all the way back to 2018 who had hoped that Kentucky sports radio host Matt Jones would run. And I thought that he might be able to bring something unique into the race. And I was, like many people, disappointed when he decided not to run. But he did something very generous at that time, which is he said, you really need to talk to this guy, Mike Broihier, who I'd heard of Mike. I just didn't know much about him. And he said, you really need to talk to this guy. And he gave me Mike's phone number and encouraged me to give him a call. And so Mike and I spoke on the phone for the first time. I think it was in December while I was working on the Iowa caucus for Yang and in Des Moines. And I just kind of called him up and just said who I was. And we just had a good conversation. We spoke a few more times. And then after Yang's campaign ended, we met up for a few hours in Kentucky. And because I want to see what Mike was all about. And it was very clear within the first 10, 15 minutes that Mike demonstrated a level of two traits you don't usually see commonly together, which is down to earth and authentic and genuine, and someone who doesn't look down on the people around them.
Yeah.
While at the same time, adeptly and adroitly understanding the policy issues that face the people of the state on an incredibly deep level. And those are not two things you see together in a candidate very frequently. And so with a race this important, I knew I had to jump on and do everything we could.
So, but if I recall correctly, you were actually driving home and changed and decided to drive to Kentucky.
So I was in Kentucky because this is home. But the story you're thinking of is that happened to a number of other people where after a presidential campaign disbands, everyone goes and finds their next jobs and opportunities, and that's always an exciting part. Even if it's sad when a campaign ends, it's always exciting to see what is produced by these people with this experience where they all go, and that happened after the Yang campaign, and so folks. Like Justin Williams was one. He was taking a job in Maine and with their Senate race, and then he was in Michigan or something when he spoke to Mike, and then he turned his car around and drove down to Kentucky. And that happened to a number of people. And I think it's really credit to the very genuine nature of the team. When I was talking to people about this, about Mike, and gauging people's interest in joining the team. They would say, at first they would say, this sounds crazy. And then they would say, this sounds like it's really important. And they wanted to get involved. And one thing I told them was, the campaign has no money. The campaign has no political infrastructure or donor network. So I can't guarantee you when or if ever you will be paid. And I also can't guarantee what job you're going to have. And every single person, down to the person who came into the organization, this is something I'm so grateful for, was totally mission first. And that is, I think, if there's one thing to credit, besides Mike, of course, one thing to credit the campaign's success, it is the mission first mindset of the team, where it was of any campaign I've worked in, low drama, zero ego. No one cares about their position or who gets to do what. Everyone's just focused on what is the mission and what do I need to do to make it happen. And that was just a treat to be a part of.
That's so encouraging, because you're right. Those of us who work in politics know that some campaigns are some combination of Peyton Place and Survivor, and you just live, it's drama every day. I want to get back to the mission, but before I do, I want to share a couple more comments from Facebook. Here's one from Cece Hall. Another person hoping you run again. Mike, you might have to be starting another campaign here, like today. And this one, I think you will appreciate from Mr. Yang. Misses even the mobile home. So let's talk a little bit about that mission. So, you ran hard. You put together a pretty professional campaign in the midst of a pandemic, and like you said, no donor base, and so on and so forth. I want to ask you some hard questions. Were you surprised at the vote totals? Were you surprised at where you wound up? I mean, you might have thought, okay, we'll probably come in third because Booker has made this run here at the end. But were you surprised at how that turned out? Mike,
you want to go first?
Mike, you go ahead. I'll go second.
Yeah, it was, 5% is 5%. That's kind of a whooping, and that's all right. I think that the numbers had solidified in the last week or so, and until that point, we really saw a path forward, and just with really no visibility on what was happening with mail-in votings, our confidence in our base as far as mail-in votings. So the final number was it was not a surprise by that the number had firmed up probably a week before the election, but I think that it was hard. It's hard to say. It really is not a surprise. After a week, but before then, I think that when Liam and I and Lynn talked about the numbers, we saw a mathematical path forward, and we just kept driving on it. And but the most important thing for me, of course, you spoke about mission earlier. What was the mission? And frankly, running against Mitch McConnell, which is what this campaign was really focused on, was running against Mitch McConnell. And I don't want to say it's easy, but it's a target-rich environment, and it is, it is a very polarized kind of race. There's good and evil in this race, and that's the way I view it. And we're the good guys, and so it makes it easier to get up in the morning and keep pushing because it is so important. And Liam and I spoke earlier, I always felt a little hyperbolic when I said that McConnell posed an existential threat to the Republic, but I still feel that today. There was no exaggeration intended. His failure to show any kind of restraint on the executive branch and what he's doing the executive is something I've talked about since last July, since a year ago. And he's not relented, and he still is pushing, though he has distanced himself from the president because I think he feels it's harmful. But the bottom line is he is still getting what he wants, which is free reign in the Senate to exercise authority and to enrich himself. Yeah.
No, I don't think it's hyperbolic at all. I think we've got to get rid of both Trump and McConnell. Liam, what about you? What did you think when you saw the numbers?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. One is that the way I see it, the job of a candidate and of a campaign, no matter what the context, is to set the necessary conditions for success, right? To prepare for a successful environment, and such that there's so many factors that you cannot control in a campaign, and it is by the time winning set of circumstances may come along, and you're blessed with those winning set of circumstances. Mm-hmm. If you haven't prepared well, it doesn't matter. And so our job is to do what was within our control and to prepare. And I think that there were a number of periods during the primary where it looked like we were certainly, like, all of the numbers, both publicly and internally, were going in the right direction. But obviously that was, especially for the last 2 weeks of the campaign, it was not the right environment. I will also say to this point is that I think, and this is something, it's not just something to learn from this particular race, but something to learn from all the races going on around the country, is that from a campaign standpoint, there's a lot of different indicators that people look at for success. I think that the single indicator that matters the most, of course, you need money, you need endorsements, you need a solid volunteer base, you need a grassroots operation. The most important thing that moves the needle the most is earned media attention in the traditional media still, both on television and in newspapers. And so during that period during which you're closing the deal, I think that is the thing that moves the needle the most. And I think people understand very clearly why that wasn't the case. And even some big things that the campaign was doing, frankly, during this period, didn't get the coverage I thought they should have. Like, as one example, a few weeks out from the election, one of Kentucky's leaders, Wendell Berry, endorsed Mike, and it got not much. It didn't even get its own piece in Kentucky's news outlets. And so I think that certain conditions can go a certain way. But the last point I want to make just on this is that I think something that hasn't been reported on that I find frankly very remarkable as a Kentucky Democrat is, with all due respect to Andy Beshear and Allison Lundergan Grimes and party leaders like that, for a long time, Kentucky politics, at least on a statewide level, especially on the Democratic side, has been run by a few families in a lot of ways. And I think something that I haven't heard anyone talk about that I think is frankly very exciting and bodes well for the future of the party in this state and the future of the movement in this state is that if you look at the three top candidates in this primary, Mike Broihier, Charles Booker, and Amy McGrath, nobody knew who any of those three people were 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Any of them. And that is, I think, just a remarkable statement. Whatever you think about the three candidates, each of them brought something to the race, and each of them, were complete and total political unknowns a number of years ago. And I think that is a testament to a sort of new day for the movement in this state.
I agree. And one of the things that fascinated me, like you said, was the fact that it wasn't part of the establishment, Democratic establishment. I want to ask you another hard question, and if you don't want to answer it, I understand. I want to talk about McGrath in a minute, but did you all have any discussions with Charles Booker or his campaign, either early on or later?
I'll take this one up. I don't want to get into private conversations because it's not my place to divulge private conversations. But what I'll say is that the job of there's multiple responsibilities, right, that you have to weigh in any campaign. And I think that the most important responsibility for any team of people, and by the team, I don't just mean the staff, the team, our supporters, is that we have an obligation to the team that you build, right, over the course of a campaign. And then, there's always certain points at which you might say that you need to make a switch, or that you need to collaborate with another candidate. But at least for me, and I think, I'll just speaking from the operational perspective, the guidepost is your team, and are your supporters. And especially when you have very little data on a race, as was the case in this race,
right?
You really, in many instances, don't know what exactly is going on. And so to I think, try to wrap up the campaign have been very premature and frankly disloyal in some fashion to all the people who poured effort into this campaign because they believed that this particular candidate and this particular movement around him was uniquely suited to the task of defeating Mitch McConnell. And lastly, I think that there is a real and genuine lasting impact of seeing a race through to its conclusion, to people who've been a part of it. But I'll leave it at that.
So that's great, because that leads right into a question we've got from YouTube. Can Mike or Liam talk about an issue that their campaign raised where they feel like they made an impact on the primary election? And I want to expand that and say, is there an issue that you raised that you think made an impact that went past the primary as well? So Mike or Liam, either one.
Let me start with ones that didn't make an impact. I've been doing a lot of farm work lately, and there's a lot of time to ponder. And I cannot I can't remember where I said it. I think it was on a podcast called Special Operation Forces Radio, Soft Rep Radio. And one of the last questions was, is there anything we haven't talked about that keeps you up at night? This is back in October, November. And I said, we're one international flight away from a global pandemic. And I need to go back and find that soundbite. And the guy was like, huh? And I was like, yeah, well, you asked me what we haven't talked about and what I on my list of things to worry about. And that was, number 41 or whatever it was. But that was just one of the things I thought about. But I think two things that have gone beyond the election. First of all, was Postal Service, the importance of the Postal Service. I started talking about the Postal Service last year, and that was in light of the attempted strangulation based on their completely unfair and retirement scheme, where they have to fully fund the retirement of the Postal Service for 75 years in the future. They're literally funding the retirements of postal carriers and postal workers who are yet to be born. And so that was before we began removing high-speed sorting machines, cutting back on overtime, removing post office boxes, and even before we started talking about mail-in voting. I've always been a fan of mail-in voting, but we weren't in a pandemic when the issue started. And then when the pandemic started, it became obvious, having spent a lot of time talking to postal carriers, how important the U.S. Postal Service would become. And now in recollection, Bruce, the last meeting I had with the postal workers and postal carrier unions in Lexington was the week before we locked down because of the pandemic. And at that moment, we were not wearing masks, but we were bumping elbows and washing our hands because, we were hearing about it. And obviously that is one that is carried beyond the election. And then the second one that I think that I particularly grew into as my campaign went on was the importance of universal basic income, UBI. And I don't know if you had an opportunity to watch the exchange I had during the KET debates. And I thought it was a great opportunity because, the host asked all the right questions about universal basic income.
Absolutely. And Bruce, if I can
I didn't feel like she was, there were the, go ahead, Liam.
Oh, no, sorry, Mike. I think you stopped there a little bit on the feed. I think we're seeing a little bit of that rural broadband that you talked so much about that we enjoyed on all of our campaign Google Meets. I was just going to add to the point about universal basic income. Not only did I think on that issue and a number of others, green infrastructure, healthcare, criminal justice, did I think Mike and the team help to, and all of the endorsers and community leaders around the campaign helped to put those issues out there and advance them in this state. But something that some people know and many others do not is that not only did this campaign help to advance the dialogue around these issues, but the campaign also helped to actually put the pressure on right at the necessary moment to actually get McConnell to switch his position on stimulus checks and expanded unemployment insurance back in March, when all of this was getting started. And I think that we had a very fun interaction with McConnell's team back and forth that day when we released our Corona Mitch video and started making the argument that, hey, we need to hold accountable the person who is enabling this mismanaged response that's hurting the people of the state. So and then you saw him come out 48 hours later and say, actually, we should give everyone money. And I think that, and then of course that was hugely helpful to millions of families, and that was an impact this campaign had. But secondly, everyone in America getting that most people in America getting that $1,200 check is going to, I think, prove a huge boost to the movement for universal basic income nationally in the future, because now everyone's experienced a little bit of what it's like. And so that'll help to normalize the idea in the future.
See, I think frankly, you may be even selling your campaign short, because I think that you moved a number of issues into the conversation. Obviously, UBI is the big one, but it was obvious that you were progressive and not scared about being progressive. And this was before Booker sort of, took off. And it was the contrast at that point between you and McGrath was striking to many people. And frankly, and I don't know this, I haven't talked to her. And even if I did talk with her or her staff, I'm not sure that they would admit it. But I think that you and later on Charles Booker moved her. I think you showed her, wait a minute, there's this space over here that I'm not dealing with, and I need to deal with it. I don't think she's become this, all the way to the left progressive, but her platform came out yesterday. I don't know if you've looked at it, but it's a lot more progressive than I would have thought. And I think that you all helped that happen. I think you moved some things around.
I'll say this, Bruce, the last event that Amy and I did together was a voter registration for felons who'd had their voting rights restored. And so, and I have to say, Colonel McGrath spoke very, very heartfully and genuinely to these. It was all women, and they'd come from a house, and they had their voting rights restored. They were felons, and they were there to register for the first time. And one of the women that I spoke to after the event was in her mid late 30s. And she had got her first felony conviction before her 18th birthday. And this would be the first time in her whole life that she'd be allowed to vote. And she just, I mean, there were tears in her eyes. And so I was very happy that Colonel McGrath invited me to go to that particular event because I feel very strongly about it. And that is, I think that's probably indicative of that movement of which you're speaking.
So I want to be respectful of your time. And it's 12:32, so I don't want to hold us too long. Although I could do this a lot longer because I find the whole discussion fascinating.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So, Liam, what's next for you?
First on the list has been working with everyone on this extraordinary team that assembled around this candidate. To try to help as much as I can to help them find out what they're doing next. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, it really is one of the great, exciting things about a campaign that does have a positive culture like this, where people, it's actually rare, for those of you who are watching who haven't worked inside a campaign, it is actually quite rare for a campaign to end and everyone to still like each other, and really it is unfortunate that it is the case, but it actually is unfortunate, or where, like the staff still likes their candidate, after having to deal with them every day for 24/7, and that the candidate still likes their staff. And that's a really special thing. And so
particularly having to watch him stagger around the farmhouse in his skivvy in the morning, that no one should have to see the candidate.
Exactly. Then you've seen everything. So, in that spirit, everyone on the team now is a lot of people, took some well-deserved time to rest and recharge, and now folks are going out there working on different campaigns and organizations and causes all over the country, and taking the sort of experiences that they received on this campaign and the tactics, especially of how to organize digitally and virtually in a pandemic, taking those practices and skills to good causes around the country. There are too many to name, but that's been job number one. And then I'm hoping to take some of what we talked about here over the next number of months to try to further advance the conversation around universal basic income nationally. And I'm not sure exactly what form that will take, but that'll be probably something I'm focusing on, because I think what this demonstrated is that there really is, that this is not just something for, big blue coastal cities, right? But that this is something that speaks to all of the country and in the countryside. And that's something I would like to see. I would like to see more of. And then if I can, just one small thing, I really just wanted to say, to the point that you made, Bruce, about the platform, about Amy's platform. That's something I've been very appreciative of, is there's been a great deal of collaboration, not just Mike and Amy going out together and, stumping together and doing events like the voter registration event that Mike mentioned, but also our teams have been collaborating, on a policy level. I've, been in touch with, they have a great policy guy named Jamie, Sandy, their campaign chair, Courtney, their communications person, all just really wonderful people. And I think that something that we have bonded over, despite, our differences, like, every primary is rambunctious. The presidential primary was crazy, with 27 presidential candidates. This was relatively tame, compared to that. And so, you've got these three major candidates, and they all have, different things they're putting out there. And I think it's really great now that we're all sort of banded together. And one of the things that we've, I think, bonded with Amy's team over, and Mike, I don't know if I told you this, but it's just the fact that both Mike and Amy, haven't been, lifelong, like, ambitious politician types, that, despite their differences, they're, both in it for the same patriotic reasons and trying to do the right thing for their fellow citizens. And so that's something that's been a basis for collaboration, which I'm really excited about. And I think they have a good platform. And so we're rooting for them to be successful here in 74 days.
Cool. Excellent. Mike, how about you? What's next for you?
Well, I'll say this one thing, if there's no one else around, Marines are happy to fight each other. But if it's someone who's not a Marine, we'll put our backs together and fight anybody. And that's the way I feel about this campaign. And so I was pleased when Amy, Colonel McGrath, reached out to me, and we've had actually a couple really nice conversations. And I've introduced her to a couple of folks and talked to her about a few policy issues. And so, Bruce, I do, and not to tell you your business, but I encourage you to make time to talk to her, because everyone who has the opportunity to talk one-on-one with her finds her to be very warm and genuine. Sometimes that does not come across well on the, in the advertisement or in the interview or whatever, but I think you'd enjoy it. She's an interesting person, very warm. So I think that I'd encourage you to do that. Another thing, and I know that you said we're not pressed for time, so I'm going to blab for a minute here, but one thing that is important is organizational culture, and Liam, Liam spoke to it about, at the end of something like this, that people don't end up hating each other or don't end up, carrying a grudge, and a lot of that. I think there's two things to a small part of it. I think Lynn and I played a small part to it because we had formed our platform by ourselves on what we felt was right. And I think, and so that was I don't want to say it was easy, but it was the easy part of it, because you never have to remember what you're going to say or what you've said in the past or how you feel. That's easy. Someone asks you a question, it's just like, boom, here's the answer. You don't have to pump, you don't have to look up or anything like that. And so I think that might have drawn the right people to my campaign. And then, of course, a large part of the organizational structure, the character of the campaign was driven by, Liam. And one thing that Lynn and I did not know about politics was that there are a lot of people who this is what they do. And on early days, Lynn and I found out that we were what are called normies, which is we do live, eat, and breathe politics. And we had never heard that term before, but someone early on told us we were normies, and then they were normies. But anyways, Liam was and I would hear him on the phone, and as soon as someone started asking, who was their boss, who were they going to be in charge of, what their title was, I could hear him disconnected really quick, saying, back to you, because he knew that he had a short time to put a team together, and there was no room for egos. There was no room. There was no room for staking out, and there was no time, because when he was putting the team together, we thought that the primary date was April 18th. So
May 19th.
May 19th, right? So, but the clock was ticking.
Yeah, right.
And you didn't know we were gonna get another month, and so it was great. And one thing I have to say is, Liam is a very young man, and intuitively, the things I learned over a career in the Marine Corps about building a team and about leadership, and what's important, that Liam knew this instinctively and executed it very, very well. And the folks he brought on, they understood what the rules were, and it was a beautiful thing to watch. And I'll go back to one more thing. You're talking to Liam about his first phone call with us in December when he was still in Iowa. Lynn and I interviewed him together. We hung up the phone, and Lynn said, "We need Liam," and our decision was made. And that was that. It was like, okay, this is the professionalism, this is the intelligence, this is the integrity, and the drive that's going to put our campaign over the top. And so, and of course, the great group of people we brought on. It was just a pleasure to see him in action. Now, you ask what's next for me. A lot of farm work, and that's it's hard to, you come off a campaign, yourself know how it is, and so I don't know what's next for me. McConnell's the great enemy, and I'm hoping that in November he will no longer be the great enemy. That he'll just fade off, in the ash heap of history. But that's what drew me off the farm. That's into this fight, and that was the focus. And it's someone else's fight right now, but I'm happy to support her campaign, Amy's campaign, in absolutely any way I can. And that's the short one.
And Bruce, I can't let Mike's comment go. I go about crediting me with this. I was a conduit, but and certainly played a role, but I represent a much larger group of people who are not on here on this broadcast, and I see our organizing director Connor Murphy here commenting about Mike's level of involvement at every level was a key part of why the team worked well, which is absolutely true. When you have a insecure or shape-shifting candidate who doesn't know what they stand for, it's very difficult to run a team. And Mike always kept us grounded in what was the right thing to do, what was okay and what was not okay. Sometimes I found that frustrating because it's always a tension between the political ruthless campaign manager and the candidate. But you need that candidate to say, this is what I'm about, and this is how we're going to run the ship. And so that was from him, and I think that's how someone runs their campaign is an indication of how they would be in their elected office. And so that's something there. And then in addition, there's all these people who people don't know as well. Connor, who ran our organizing, Justin, who did our fundraising and ran our whole campaign schedule, Cece, who put together all those virtual town halls, Pang, who ran all these, sent 2.8 million text messages all across the country and all across Kentucky, and his digital team, which is Alex and Rebecca, Laura Whitaker and Sierra, who helped put together all these town halls. Trying to make sure there's so many people I don't want to miss, but we broke out the state into regions. There was Nick and Aiden and Griffin and Henry, who ran each different congressional districts of the state, and McCoy. Shreyas was this young man I met on the Yang campaign who recruited like 30 people to become organizing and finance fellows on the campaign to make phone calls, which is fantastic. And there was just so many other people who jumped in. The whole press team, the whole communications team, which is fantastic. There are 200 press interviews they set up over the course of a few months. And, Greg and Alyssa and Luke and Chris, it's just a fantastic group of people. And they all made it that way. And I think that someone like Mike was able to pull a team like that together, I think is proof, which is another positive thing for the future of politics in this state, is that you don't need to be someone with massive, establishment backing or a vast political network to run a competitive race, right? There's something beautiful about democracy that, as it was originally intended, that someone who's just a normal person with good ideas and a civic sense of duty can just step up and say, this is what I'm going to do, and actually run a credible race. That is how it should be in this country. And I think this race is proof of that.
I'm so encouraged to hear everything that you're sharing. I love the fact that y'all have collaborated with the McGrath campaign. That's a real mark of maturity, in my opinion. And Liam, something you were talking about Mike, there's a phrase that I think is meaningful, is somebody who is comfortable in their own skin. And I would much rather work for somebody like that. And I would much rather be somebody like that. So that's good stuff all the way around. I really appreciate both of you being on here. I have a couple of last comments to share. Let's see. Here's one. Great conversation. Thanks to Mike and his team. And I'm going to close with this one. If you ever choose to run again, call me up.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I know which Oliver that is. Oh boy. Yeah.
So Mike, it sounds like you've got people ready to jump back in if you are ever ready to jump back in. Liam deClive-Lowe and Mike Broihier, thank you both for being on the state of Kentucky. I really appreciate your time. I want to remind everybody as we close that if you want to support this work, go to forwardky.com/join and become a member to help pay for the work we do. Guys, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you for all you do.
Thanks, Bruce. It's great talking to you, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk again soon. So long, Liam. Bye, Bruce.
Bye.